Go. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Tonight, I'm super excited to have tonight's guest. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Jeremy. I am the owner of Family First Canine. Among some of the many things I do, I'm an NACSW judge, AKC scent work judge, CPE scent work judge, canine handler, trainer, certified official, Gold School graduate. I'm not going to go into my resume too much because we've talked about it over and over on the channel. What I do want to do is turn it over to Frank at this time because I want to make sure that we do his resume justice because I am really honored to have him as a guest here tonight. So, Frank, if you don't mind to kind of give us a rundown about your career and your experience and what you're currently up to.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm honored and I appreciate it. I want to start by where I came from is I retired from the National Explosive Detection Canine Team program. Um, it's the Homeland Security's training center at Lackland Air Force Base, where I spent about 12 years as a trainer and evaluator. Prior to that, I was with the Federal Air Marshal Service, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, uh, and long story short, my entire career has revolved around, in some sort of fashion or another, has revolved around dogs. Um, so I want to start off by being very clear about one thing. I believe that a considerable portion of the listeners, our nose work, have some kind of connection to nose work, and I want to be very clear up front that I'm not an expert in the sport of nose work. I don't compete. I don't title dogs, and I don't teach specific sport specific rules or strategies. Like I said, what I am is a practitioner of detection. My entire career has revolved around odor, has revolved around canine capabilities and real world problem solving. The reason I enjoy um, conversations like this is because whether it's sport, operational detection, pet dogs, I don't want to critique other methods. Um, what I enjoy is to offer a different lens or a different perspective, I guess you could say. I understand that there's more than one way to skin a cat, and just because it's not my way doesn't mean it's wrong. Um, I enjoy looking at other people's techniques and methods. I learn. I'm trying to continuously learn different approaches. That being said, I hope I can give you a perspective this evening, one that may validate some things that you're doing, that you already do, challenge a few assumptions, and hopefully give you a couple of aha moments that you can um, take back into your training regimen. So, with that being said, welcome to answer your questions, Jeremy, uh, that you have for me.
All right, and I want to thank everybody that's reached out to kind of give me a list of questions. It's always really enjoyable to do something once a month. We try to bring in a guest instructor to improve everybody's knowledge because the one thing I can definitely say is that in the sport of nose work, people are actively seeking more and more knowledge and trying to improve their skills. So we're going to start this off with the first question, and we're going to start off with, what projects are you currently working on?
So right now, my primary focus is what I call my React system, remote extracted air canine technology, and the development of that I've combined with olfactometers. Um, in simple terms, React is about taking odor out of complex environments such as shipping containers, TEUs, um, semi truck contain trailers, tractor trailers, large cargo spaces, and capturing that odor on filters. Instead of immediately putting a dog in these massive search environments, um, we bring the odor to the dog. We then train and condition the canines to recognize at extremely low concentrations, trace level concentrations um, of odor. So where the olfactometers come in is they allow us to precisely control odor presentation. They allow us to how much odor, how often it's presented, under what conditions. So the dog just isn't learning odor, but they're learning accuracy. They're learning discrimination, reliability, while at the same time still on trace level concentrations of odor, very low thresholds. So at its core, the project is about protecting and refining what canines already do better than any technology: odor detection. At the same time, we're removing the shortcuts, the guesswork, and the human influence as much as possible. So that's pretty much my project, ongoing project currently. That what I'm involved with.
Right, so that leads me to our second question. From your perspective, what's the biggest misconception people have about detection dogs or detection work in general?
Uh, well, if anyone's been to my workshop or sit in on my classes, my lectures, you'll know what I say. You'll is is I always start off with saying detection is simple, but it's not easy. And when you understand that, that understanding will create most of your other misunderstandings in detection. So many things through generations, people have looked at detection and they've seen, oh, it's in simple concept, I can teach that, but they don't understand the intricacies. They don't understand the details. And through generations, they'll teach someone, then they'll teach someone, then things start falling off through and getting lost in the cracks. So the first misconception is that it's a simple concept, which it is, but they don't understand the rigorous procedures and the details that we all know that's part of our craft. Other than that, one of the biggest that comes to my mind, one of the biggest misconceptions is that dogs do not understand the odor the way we describe it, right? We use terms like odor cone, threshold, source, parts per million, parts per billion, but they're all human constructs. They don't. They help us talk about odor. We need to know those terms. They help us visualize odor, but they don't necessarily reflect how the dog actually experiences it. We even rely on smoke and vapor to explain odor behavior. And that reality, it's a rough analogy for air movement and currents. Still not a true representation of how odor evaporates, dissipates, breaks apart, reconcentrates, reconstitutes. And the bottom line is, in reality, odor often behaves in ways that contradict human logic. So at the end of the day, I'd say first, we don't train the dogs to find the material. We train the dogs to find odor. We train them to respond to an odor picture, and that picture isn't that picture is fluid. It's not static. And the real shift for handlers is this: we need to stop trying to make odor fit our expectations, and instead become better students of odor and how odor really behaves in the real world. one of the biggest misunderstandings that I've seen with that can represent that is during certifications and evaluations. I've seen dogs respond 5, 6 feet away from a placement, 10, 15 feet away, even more in some scenarios. Um, and I've seen evaluators and trainers make a call that the dog is wrong, make the no call. So that misunderstanding, man, that can create some serious negative transfers, especially in training, certifications, and ultimately in real world operations. So when I know the placement, when I know the wind direction, when I know the material, I take all of those things into consideration, and I don't underestimate a dog's capability. Are you following me on that? I
Yeah.
take everything into consideration, and I say, okay, is the dog responding on odor? Maybe he could do better. That's a different story. The bottom line is that the dog is not wrong. The dog responded. Maybe they could do better, but the dog did respond on odor or because of an encounter with odor. So yeah, I just think it's one of the big misunderstandings that if we want reliable detection dogs, we have to evaluate odor behavior just as critically as we evaluate the dog. Otherwise, we end up training for expectations
Mhm.
rather instead of the realities of odor. What else would be a big misunderstanding is how much human influence is involved that exists in odor work. They're masters. Dogs are masters at finding shortcuts. Uh, if there's an easy, especially when you're dealing with low thresholds, if there's an easier path to odor, body language, anticipation, pattern, handler movement, they're going to find it. And I've told people before not to put anthropomorphize or some people have said, oh, that dog's lying or that dog. It doesn't make them dishonest, so to speak. To me, it makes them brilliant because they're looking for that easier way.
Right.
I can relate to them quite well, if you know what I'm saying. Um, this is something we've seen before. The clever Hans effect. It's a perfect reminder that animals can read subtle behaviors far better than we realize. Even when we're 100% trying to be neutral, they're picking something out that we're doing and they're associating. That's the way dogs learn, through association. And it's something that we need to be cognizant of. And here's the hard truth: no matter how hard we try to read I mean, that's our craft, is reading change of behavior, reading their behaviors, watching dogs perform. No matter how hard we try to learn those behaviors, we'll never be able to match their ability to read our behaviors. Um, so that's pretty much what I have on that. The odor, the understanding of odor, and the amount of human influence that we have in detection.
Okay. So that kind of goes into the next question. Do you think, as handlers, that we overhandle our dogs?
We got some dip. Hang on just a second. Do you see me?
I don't see you. We can hear you. Um, right now, all I see is your initials.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. What was it? What was your? I'm sorry. What was your question again?
So, do you think handlers overhandle their dogs?
Everyone. I shouldn't say everyone. Uh, we all fall into that. We all can fall into that category. of overhandling. I think it's an ongoing problem through every country I've been in, every city, every agency. Everyone does until they don't. If that kind of makes sense. And what do I think it's that damn leash,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
think the leash is the most misused um, piece of equipment in handling. Uh, it's the leash, and I guess it's also the over presentations. Those are your two categories that the first thing that comes to my mind when you mentioned over handling. Those are the two things. Handlers need to understand that the leash is not there to guide, steer, direct. And they also need to understand that they do not need your hand to find something. And so many people are thinking, okay, I'm going to pull my dog over here. I'm going to jerk the dog here. And to me, in the back of my mind, what I'm thinking at this time is you have an instrument, an asset that is able to do something that technology in 2025 can't do. And you're wanting to yank, guide, and steer this biosensor, and you're trying to jam your dirty, stinky hand into his search areas, and it just is interfering. It's taking away the capabilities of the dog, in my opinion. Um, and overhandling it, usually what I've seen is it doesn't come from ego. It comes from uncertainty or anxiety from the handlers, especially when the handler wants to help, but they don't fully trust what they're seeing yet. As handlers, I think once you gain experience and you start trusting the dog, have somebody help you. Just let the dog work. You've already put in the hard work in training. Trust the dog's problem solving ability and realize they don't need that leash. They don't need you to steer them to where odor is. Um, and once they do that, I think that anxiety and everything is going to kind of make that mechanic slow down a little bit. Handlers to start moving less, presenting less, interfering less. And I think the key is um, structured training in the beginning to show the dog what he's supposed to do, and then fade that structure out to where, hey, you let the dog do what he's supposed to do and he's going to do it. So you do that through clear setups, clean criteria, um, and well-designed training problems. I guess when when you build that in, when you do that, when you do put that structure in at first, and then you show them that they're allowed to have independence, and you reinforce that independence, man, you're going to have a beautiful asset to work detection with. So that's my 2 cents on overhandling. Do I think it's an ongoing problem? Absolutely. But I think you know, working with handlers and telling them, good trainers that are enforcing, hey, let that dog work. They don't need you to present. They don't need you to guide and steer. You'll see this overhandling reduce, so to speak.
All right. So the next question, I kind of want to get back to something you touched on earlier, because really interested in what you've got going on. We're talking about your React system. So when you're working in extremely low odor levels with React and olfactometers, how do you achieve such a high success level with low false positives?
Well, I don't believe there is a one. A lot of people have asked me that. They're like, how do you get high success, low false positives at such a low quantities of amounts of odor. And I don't think there's a single ingredient. I learned this, um, within the past 5 or 6 years. I've always was under the uh, assumption that most people, odor is odor. You just use less odor. But the reality is that working extremely low, very low thresholds is extremely complex. Um, in much of conventional detection, there's an underlying belief, as I was saying, that odor is odor. At trace levels, that assumption breaks down completely. And I know that that will raise eyebrows in some groups and listeners. Um, but in detection, we all have to agree that mistakes matter, and they all have consequences. And what I've seen, not that what I believe in, but what I've documented with data and trials, is that these mistakes will compound these matters. So um, I believe the most minute mistake when you're dealing with this is the difference between success and complete failure. If a reward timing is sloppy, if predictability creeps in, the dog starts filling in the gaps. Uh, that's when you see the false alerts, anticipation, and growing handler dependency from the dogs with these low. Like I said, they're looking for a short the shortcut, and especially at the low concentrations, they're going to be looking twice as hard. If contamination controls aren't absolutely solid, you that's a whole different topic in itself. When you're at such a low threshold, if you don't have strict contamination controls, you don't know what you're training the dog on. COVID detection was a good example. When I'm not mentioning any names, but I'm watching different groups train this way, and I'm watching them train in environments that are porous, that are dirty, and I'm watching the instruments that they're using, and in the back of my mind, I know they didn't know what they were actually training the dog on. So there isn't one magic. I wouldn't say there's one magic tool. It's all the rigorous controls, clean setups, the precise timing, and eliminating the shortcuts. Um, I guess if I wanted to throw something somebody could actually take, that I'm a big proponent of, and that is definitely necessary in low threshold training and trace level training, is the reinforcement schedules. Um, I think strategic variability in reinforcement, it isn't a trick. It's proven scientific safeguards and an approach that they prevent predictability, they reduce anticipation, and keep the dog working honestly at low thresholds. So I'm a big proponent of reward schedules, varying the reward schedules. I came from a school where it was do or die. You don't leave a continuous reward schedule. Yep. Bottom line. And I don't know if I could say that you're going to hell if you leave it, but that was the mindset. But after a few years back, I realized, wow, we can gain so much control through a reinforcement schedule. We can get so much better performance. And the example that I give is when I'm training dogs on low thresholds, there's no way they can maintain that level of success at such a low threshold without the reinforcement schedules. Dogs trained under well-designed reinforcement schedules do not plateau. Their performance will escalate. And I've seen it, and I've read it, I've seen the studies on it, and I've used it on dogs. I've compared it to dogs that have a continuous reinforcement schedule versus a variable, and it's night and day difference. So if you haven't, for anybody out there that would is wanting something to really take your dog to a different level, um, take a deeper look into the variable reinforcement schedules, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. Um, so if I call anything the golden key to to low threshold training, it'd probably be the reinforcement schedules that we use.
Okay. Yeah, and that's kind of quite different than what we see in the sport realm. Um, I've been kind of preaching that for years, and sometimes I get blank looks when I mention that. They just look at me like, "How dare you?" And then you try to get into, "Hey, look, sometimes expectation of that reward increases the dog's dopamine, and they're going to work harder." And after you, like for instance, I was at a trial last year, and this lady came up to me. She said, "Hey, my dog is stressed. He's not taking food. You know." She said, "I don't know what to do." And she goes, "Obviously, if I drop the food in the search area, it's going to count against me, right?" And I said, "Just go to the start line and let your dog search." I said, "You don't have to give him food. He's going to do it." And I said, "See how it goes." I said, "He finds the first one, give him a verbal reinforcer, and send him on to the next one." So anyway, long story short, she finished her search, and she thanks me. She goes, "I wish I'd known that last year when I was struggling to finish an NW3 trial." I said, "Well, I said I say it every once in a while, but oftentimes I get strange looks, I get dirty looks like, 'How dare you say that?' or 'No, that won't work.'" But it does absolutely.
The um, the other path that leads to is I don't get involved in this social media drama
Yeah.
that's prevalent that's ongoing through today's social media. But I see things on there, and one of the big concerns that came from I guess a law enforcement aspect. Um, you have the groups, you have categories that believe if your dog finds something on the street, that dog should be paid every time. And in the back, I'm thinking if you're training with a variable reinforcement schedule, it it wouldn't matter. You don't need to pay your dog every time. You know what? Is that
Hmm. Yep.
maybe you can rephrase that to a better delivery, but that's definitely the answer. I mean, uh, I don't pay my dog every time, or to a certain extent. Maybe change the payment method, or from a primary to a secondary reward or whatnot. Um, Here's my rule of thumb. Back to I just read one of my notes, and I always tell people if I'm teaching a new behavior, absolutely, I'm a one for one continuous reward schedule.
Hmm.
But if I've surpassed that, I'm into training. I'm into maintenance training. The dog knows his task. I always say if continue on a continuous reinforcement schedule, I'm no longer training the dog. The dog is training me, and that's I think it's a pretty good way to look at it. If you just another way to explain it, I guess. Anyway.
Hey, so I don't know if you can see this. We actually have a question popped up in our stream. Uh, Curtis Lynn, 1776. And the different venues of scent detection, we go from really high levels of odor to relatively low levels. Should you train the week prior to the degree of odor that you're going to compete with? So what that means is, so like AKC places 2 drops of an essential oil on a Q-tip. I mean, that's pretty stout. Like if I was crawling around, I could sniff it out. But you go to like CPE, it may be they're 1 drop, or NACSW actually will make more like a cocktail method where they'll put the odor in there to a certain strength and allow it to absorb in the Q-tips. So you're going to have various levels of odor at different venues. Um, Now, I don't know about doing it a week prior. I just always kind of fluctuate. you know, what levels that I'm working with. And sometimes I've said this before, I'll have friends come over with their training odor because there's also no to assure quality control from one vendor to the next. This stuff could have been sitting on the shelf for 2 years. And if I buy from one vendor and somebody buys from, let's say Jimmy buys from Learberg and I bought from Canine NW Source and somebody else bought from Amazon, we're gonna take turns, use a little bit of all that. That's just how I approach it. But what's your kind of thought on that?
Well, like I kind of explained, Jeremy, this is so out of my wheelhouse. Um, I appreciate the question. I'd like for him to email it to me so I can spin it around in my melon, take it so I can
Okay.
get a better before I shoot from the hip on that question.
Mm.
Uh, and I don't know if so. I'll leave it at that. I will
Okay.
say, as far as changing things, uh, I'll put this on conventional detection and certifications. I don't like the idea of changing methods a month before an event. Does that make sense? Did
Yeah.
I? The dog, you're going to have enough stress and anxiety and everything before a certification or a trial, a competition. You're going to have enough. The dog's going to know anyway.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't. My recommendation is always be very careful of changing the picture for the dog. And number one, I think we'll. I always go back to a principle I have when I have a certification or event, and it's this level. I'm training for a marathon.
Hmm.
I'm training here, right? If I have a search and the certification requires a 10-minute or 15-minute search, I'm not training for a 15-minute search. I'm training for a 30-minute search. So when it comes time for whatever the certification, whatever the standard is, uh, I'm going to breeze through that.
Right.
And I don't know if you could take that information, Jeremy, and put it in lines with what he asked, but
Yeah, so we kind of do that with the people that train with me. Now in the sport realm, it kind of breaks down like it'll be like novice, advanced, excellent, or level 1, level 2, level 3. So when people train with me, we typically get our dogs ready for like the highest levels before we even allow them to jump in on the beginning level or the novice level. That way the dogs kind of breeze through it. It's kind of like back when I did Schutzen. Before we entered that BH, we would be ready for our Schutzen 3, and then we would just knock it out 1, 2, 3 afterwards. BH 1, 2, 3. Uh, I always kind of also said that, with my sport dogs, if I think if this dog was actually going to certify and pass certification, that's kind of also kind of the gold standard I looked at too. Because as we progress in the sport, the hides will get the height on which the hides can be will increase. The accessibilities to the hides will change. So if you're looking at AKC at like master's level or detective, then it does get very more realistic. You may have you have an exterior and an interior. You'll have multiple rooms. You'll have multiple distractions, multiple odors. So it does get more challenging. So what I always do is I will just train my dog. I'm not going to jump in with a puppy. I will train that dog till it's ready to do the highest level and then start.
sounds good. Do me a favor, send me that question. That guy, what
Okay.
was his name?
It says Curtis Lynn, 1776.
Yeah, Curtis. I'll be. Feel free to email me that question. I'm not sure I can. I think Jeremy, but for my own knowledge, like I said, I like getting as much information as I can. Uh, I like to spin it around in my mind and give you my 2 cents on it. So, and I'm very I can't wait to see my first nose work uh, competition trial. So Jeremy, anytime you want to invite me, let's check it out.
Well, I tell you what, my schedule, I'm all over the place this year. So far, it looks like I've got about 30 weekends booked as far as judging goes for 2026. So, um, yeah, man, I mean, we'd love to have you out. We're even going to host some in Kentucky. So, we're looking at doing a few in Paducah. So, you can always come on out and uh, check it out. We're going to take advantage of that wonderful facility there in Paducah. Have some fun out there because we're gonna do it at Elite. We're gonna host it at Jason's facility, and why not? I mean, it's a world class facility. Uh,
Nice,
some
yeah.
places struggle to have vehicles do vehicle searches, and you step on the backside of his property, and there's 20 Humvees and about 10 standard cars and school buses and trailers from tractor trailers. I mean, you know, I'd be crazy not to try to host something there.
People underestimate the when you have training facility. I've been to places, different countries where they just struggle to get a couple cars. When you have access to big training like that, training environments like that, oh, it's so much better. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, and he's definitely doing it up right. His new training building's going to have search rooms, and then there's also a school that takes care of us. It was I guess it was a private school that closed down, but the church is still there and active. And anytime we have training, they allow us full access to the school, and it's like a time capsule. They didn't move anything out of that school. There's still textbooks in some of the desks. So it's nice when we're setting stuff up. But we're going to move on because here's a question that a lot of people talk about. Oftentimes, people struggle with this. A lot of people talk about change of behavior. How do you personally define it, and what advice do you have for reading it?
Wow. Well, I got to start off with saying the change of behavior. That's my passion. I mean, that's our language with our dogs. You know, uh, yeah. Well, let's start with the formal definition. Swig Dog's definition. Um, a characteristic pattern of behaviors as interpreted by the handler that occurs when the dog detects a trained odor. This differs from other olfactory interests that otherwise are exhibited in response to the daily environment. So that's the technical definition. My definition, a lot simpler. It's your language with your dog. Change of behavior is any behavior that is indicative or the same or mirrors, however you want to say it, on how your dog behaves when it encounters the trained odor. I mean, you've seen this before. You know it well. You know it better than anybody else. That's your dog speaking to you through his behaviors, right? So if the dog is telling you, it's the dog telling you through behavior that there's not just something in the environment that's changed, but something is there, something is present that's very rewarding. And you know that behavior better than anybody else, better than a trainer, better than an evaluator. And that's, to me, that's why it's something that's imperative that we learn those behaviors. And I always say this: there's strong changes of behavior, there's subtle changes of behavior. Every dog's different. Um, I've even explained it where it's a chain of behaviors. That means, okay, the dog sits, something happens before that. The dog's tail's wagging, something's happening before that. The ears are changing. The dog is bracketing. The dog is air sit. There's behaviors that are just not just one, but it becomes a clear language between you and your dog, that you know the difference between a dog sniffing another dog odor. You can see that. I called it when handling on the street. I knew when my dog was kind of closed mouth and almost the tongue coming out and a smooth scent sniffing behavior. I knew it was other animals. And then I knew when a head jerk happened or an air scent behavior and I seen some excitement. I knew that was a trained odor, right? You got to let it fulfill itself, but it was definitely something that I could tell the difference. I knew the difference. I knew what my dog was saying. So that's my opinion on change odor. Why is it so important? Well, from a legal standpoint, courts have ruled that the change of behavior is sufficient for probable cause, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And back to OSAC and Swig Dog definitions, absence of a final response means you don't get the final response that has been documented and um, and placed for legal rulings. That absence of a final response doesn't mean there's not an odor present. A characteristic change of ongoing behavior in response to the trained odor as interpreted by the handler is sufficient to be a response to be categorized as a response. You don't need that behavioral final response. And I guess the other issue with change of behavior that a lot of people ask is, well, why don't you get a final response? Well, there's a lot of reasons. There could be training issues. It could be a generalization issue that the dog is saying, okay, I'm seeing the components, but there's a missing component. It's close, and it's just not there. But it's enough to be there to signify to me that that's a trained odor he's been trained on before. So that's to me in a nutshell. That's why it's important. Um, I've had people say, well, without the trained response, there's nothing there. And the only thing I can tell you is uh, speaking with people that have worked in the sandbox, so to speak. They've searched for IEDs that that change of behavior becomes even more important. They don't want to wait until that final response happens. They've seen that. That's enough. That's sufficient. They're out of town. They're calling EOD, so that they don't even want to wait for the final response. So I think that. What was the last part of the question you said? How would I?
What advice do you have for reading?
Okay. So the first thing in reading change of behavior, my first go-to when somebody says, "Hey, I'm having difficulty reading change of behavior," I ask how many blanks they're running. And usually they're not running that many blanks. And the analogy that I use is, and I could, I might be dating myself by this analogy. I'm sure there's better ways, but the way they used to train Secret Service for detecting detecting fraudulent currency is they didn't train them. They didn't teach them the different what the dirty bills look like. What they taught them was to put an exact picture of a clean currency in their mind. And they showed them and they studied the bills, they studied the currency over and over and over again. And when finally they showed them a counterfeit, it stuck out like a red flag. And I explained to people, if you run your blank problems, and that means there's no odor there, that's going to give you what I call a baseline. That's what your dog looks like when he's not on odor. And when you run this baseline and you figure out a clean picture of what the dog looks like when he's not on odor, when you finally place odor into the scenario, it's going to stick out like a red flag to you. That's my first go-to. The second thing is I asked um, how much input and influence your trainer has, because sometimes as trainers we don't want to shut up, and we always want to be there to help. Oh, did you see that? Did you miss that? You need to go back. Sometimes we just got to let it happen and let it miss till it's over with, and say, hey, listen, pull your head out. You just missed one. Then they'll say, well, why didn't you tell me nothing? Because if I'm always telling you, I'm going to become your crutch and you're always going to need me. And during certifications and during real world, I'm not going to know, you're not going to know, and I won't be there.
Yeah.
The other one that a lot of people will say is videotape. That'll help you learn.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, yeah, it may help, but sometimes more than not, I've never seen it really resolve or help. I'm not going to say I don't recommend it. I think videoing is good. I'm just saying be cautious. Sometimes the video, after I watch it, I'm kind of dizzy because usually the videotape is like all over the place. And anyway, run your blanks. And what is that's all I can come up with right now. You run your blanks, stop having a crutch, and running blanks, and run your blind problems. I'll tell you. So that's my advice on reading change of behavior. Does anybody got any questions on that?
No, I think that's good. So, and that's that's going to kind of go into like the next question. What's one thing that you think more trainers, handlers, nose work, competitors, search and rescue, what should they incorporate or would experiment with? So, if you were to develop like a training plan for somebody, what would it look like?
So my training plan secret is I introduce them to my friend Bobby. BOBE. That's an easy way for me to recommend a training plan to someone. I'm going to reiterate, I kind of got ahead of myself here, because BOBE, Bobby, will put somebody on a course that's destined for success. B, blanks. Run your blanks. And let me first define blanks, because what happens is when I ask people, I'll go places, I'll ask people what a blank is, and they'll say, yeah, we run blanks. We ran 15 vehicles and 8 were blank. Or we ran a building search and 3 rooms were blank and 1 was hot. Let's all get on the same page here, because this is going to help everybody out immensely. A blank, if you're saying you ran a blank search, you're running start to finish, no odor placement, 0. If you run 25 cars and you put 1 training aid out, that's no longer a blank search. Because running a blank, you don't know where odor is, where it's transferring to, and it's not setting you up for success as running a true blank. And a true blank, they're known and unknown. Known, they both have different purposes. We're running a little short on time and won't get into the weeds on the different purposes, but running known and unknown blanks, they both serve different purposes. The best thing I can say you can do for your coworkers, or if you're a trainer, is set up an unknown blank for your people. And when you set that up, you kind of got to go through you kind of have to win the Oscar for it. Meaning they know if you're running a blank or not, usually, because you don't take your training aid boxes to the area or you
Yeah.
don't give it any set time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Run it, set it up. And in law enforcement, I know it's critical that you put your dogs on odor, and sometimes you always want to have your dog find at least one, and sometimes it irritates your partners if you set up an unknown blank, but it's the best thing you can do for them. And so that's blanks. Run your blanks. The other thing is your open areas. Oh, open areas. Not. I've solved so many problems with simple open areas. I call it raw detection. I'm breaking nothing down. I'm breaking everything down. I'm taking out all the variables. It's nothing but the dog and odor. Sorry about that. I'm in these open areas. I know where the placement is. I know where my dog is. I'm running either a point to point or a direct to source. And these open areas, they're worth their weight in gold. The next thing is blinds. Okay. If you're always knowing where your placements are, I don't care what kind of skill level you have. I don't care how good you are in your detection training. You are hampering your ability to read your dog's change of behavior. We've seen it with the national program. We put canine teams all out and they didn't have any support. They had to set up their own problems. And we've seen the failures in the certification events. And it was simply because they were running all known problems. And they didn't have the ability to read that change of behavior because they were running knowns. So run your blind problems. Don't know where anything is. This is where the true. This is where things can get ugly if. But it's also where you refine things. You don't want to have. You want to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. Um, and the E, extend your problems. If like I was saying before, if your certification is a 10-minute event or a 15-minute scenario, make sure you're setting up scenarios to go 25, 30, 40 minutes. Extend those dogs out. It's just going to give you a better asset in the long run. BOBE, and that's my training plan. What I've told people all around the country, and it's proven successful there. Everybody. Anything
Sounds
else?
good. So here's a question where you always hear this, and it's funny when you're training. You'll hear somebody say, "Oh well," and it's always funny to hear it. Depending on the success, they'll say, "Oh, that dog looks good because it's a sport dog. That's what," or "That dog looks good because it's a police dog." And it always seems to be the answer because somebody's there and they put in the time and their dog's next level. So they'll call it a sport dog, or if they're at a sporting event, they'll call it a police dog. Um, and that gets into this question: is there anything that the sport knows work people do better than those in operational detection?
Well, like I said before, I don't know the rules verbatim. I know quite a few people in it, but to answer the question, absolutely. I've seen uh, I've seen my buddy Ruben Pena work with some nose work people, and I'm like, man, if I could teach police officers to let these dogs just work without pressure, it's like they're having fun. Well, yeah, that's because that's how dogs work the best. Because
Yeah,
they're having fun. They're letting them explore. That's the way. That's what a dog does. I mean, that's ingrained in their. That's an animal. They explore things. Allow it, and you'll see more success. But that's the main thing. Uh, I see more patience out of the nose work groups. I see more patients. That it's uh, it's one of those things where type A personalities with police officers like getting them to reward their dog and give them some praise. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, right?
Well, yeah,
I
yeah,
have,
trying to get them to celebrate with their dog, party with their dog, yeah.
yeah. So that's the main things. Like I told somebody, I said, keep up your passion. Some people, they get paid to do this, but they don't have the passion.
Right.
And some people have the passion, but they don't understand how to implement it and use it to communicate. So that's where the secret lies, in having the passion, applying it, and building, knowing how to manipulate the inner strings of a dog. That's
Hmm.
the secret. That's what makes this thing beautiful. And that's what I see good with the nose work, is the passion and having fun with it. It shouldn't be no different than operational
Right.
applications either. So,
Oh. So, what method of training do you use, and which training approach do you feel like is the best?
well, I don't know if this to hurt my business or not, but I don't have a method. Some people have asked me, "Hey, what method do you use?" or what. I think I follow principles.
Mhm.
I train the dog in front of me, and
Mhm.
when I have a dog in front of me that's, he might not need this, or he might need more of a more structure. Just like people learn differently, dogs learn differently.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
um, I think it's true. All dogs learn through association. I mean, that's kind of a proven principle, whether it's operant conditioning or classical. That's the way they learn. But I think the way we deliver it can be just a vehicle, whether it's boxes, four-hole variables, BSDs, whatever application you use. I've trained on olfactometers. I mean, I've went from the simplest to probably the most technical manners, and some things work for some dogs and some things work better for other dogs, and
Mhm.
I don't think there's just a one method. um, they're just tools, I guess.
Right.
And knowing, I think the key comes with knowing which tool to apply to different dogs.
Right.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
that's good. I always say there's a reason the Snap-on tool guy is in business, because you have to have a, different tools for different jobs. And the one true blessing I've received from jumping over, and I guess 2000, I guess it's been almost right at a decade I've been working with the nose work, scent work folks. I was getting real close to retirement, and I'm like, hey, my thought process is detection was detection. Is it made me open my mind more to multiple ways to motivate that dog to get the end result? Because what I hadn't realized is we kind of took for granted the fact that we go out and we test the dogs and we pick the dogs that we want to fit into our system. And then you teach your first workshop and you have people that are coming in with a dog that is so environmentally sensitive, they struggle to even walk in the door. So then you have to really start learning more behavior, more methods of motivating the dogs, more, the one thing takeaway I can say from the sport aspect is it has made me a better trainer. And it's been a huge blessing because then I deep dove into all these other training methods and not just like the two that I was kind of stuck on.
and 100%. You're. I think when we've talked before, I've told you I doubt I made my trial decoy status as a French ring decoy for a bit, and that was before my detection days. And behavior is behavior,
Mhm.
and however you can hone it, and however it's however you can look at a dog or put your hands on a dog, uh, it's only going to enhance your capabilities and your knowledge and your the way you approach things. No doubt. No doubt.
So I have one last question, and then we'll kind of wrap this thing up. Because I know we are, it's really close to holidays, and people are traveling and whatnot. This will be available for a replay, and I will post this link on all the different forums that we advertised on. But the question is, do you approach handling or training differently depending on the element? So, for instance, an exterior search versus vehicle searches or containers, luggage, interior search.
Well, I like I said before, I think there's definitely uh, there's definitely that at part of me that says train the dog in front of you, and I also believe that uh, like my certifications, I believe that our certifications should be operationally sound. For instance, there's no sense in certifying a dog on an aircraft if they're never going to see an aircraft. So I think that question would kind of uh, coincide with that mentality, uh, because I've trained dogs that they get on an aircraft and they're not going to understand what to do because they've never been on there before. It's going to be a new world for them. So I believe if I'm hearing the question right, yes, I would approach it differently. The principles would remain the same. There would be slight differences, but I also believe if you're training a dog and they're environmentally sound, um, and you show them that a new environment, quote unquote, a new environment or a new item shouldn't scare them or anything, you can build on that transferability to where it doesn't matter what you're searching. They're solid. Your training techniques are transferable, scalable. So that is I don't know. That's I don't know if that answered the question to
I think so. I mean, the big thing is and that may be the one thing that's overlooked in the sport realm, where for the operational side, you know, depending on who the agency is and who's testing, I know, and we all know people that go really extreme on testing the environmentalists of a dog. So, we talked about our buddy we know down there in Georgia, and I know that if I'm getting a dog from him, I'm going to trust that dog with my life, and then that dog's going to work in any environment possible. Because when he tests a dog, you can bet that dog's going to work in any environment under the sun. So,
no doubt.
so that makes sense. But I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Make sure to share this with 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 some of your colleagues, and share it with some of the people in your training group, because I try to do something once a month where I invite what we call an expert. A couple months ago, sometimes it's a judges panel. Sometimes we bring experts like yourself in, but I feel like with so many people competing in nose work, and then we have AKC's doing the Texan Dog Task Force, trying to get uh, people here in the States interested in breeding and raising detection dogs, that it's good to share the knowledge. And people have shared it with us. We've had mentors that we've been lucky enough to have that have brought us up in this. Uh, you know, Good information shouldn't always cost. And that's why we try to do something like this that's free, and just get everything out there. So before we wrap up, if anybody wants to follow you or see, where your next seminar, workshop may be? Where are you going to be, in 2026? Where should they go?
Well, you feel free to follow me on Facebook, Frank Skembry, on Facebook, Spectrum Canine Solutions. Spectrum Canine Solutions is a page on Facebook, and Olfactix, Olfactix on Instagram. Um, those are my primary means. I think, and on my Instagram is my name also, Frank Skembry on Instagram. So I'd love to have more followers. You feel free. My email, caninecommand at spectrumcanine.com. The letter K, the number 9, command at spectrumcanine.com. I think the working together and having more connections only makes our industry stronger. And I'm the one. I'm going to tell you now. If I don't know the answer, I don't shoot from the hip. I got enough. I think my connections to where I'll find an answer for you.
Right.
You
Right.
know, my ego is not too big to pick up the phone and give somebody a call because I don't know something. So,
Well, and that's how I am too. And when something stumps me, usually my first phone calls to our buddy in Georgia. you know, because I
yeah,
always tease him and call him the professor on Gilligan's Island, right? But once again, this was really nice to have. We're trying to do more stuff like this on YouTube. Hopefully we can sit down and talk again. Maybe we can sit down in Vegas and do something for folks. Because I do believe you are listed as an instructor for the conference in Vegas, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody. Thank you once again. Uh, Stay safe out there, and
Wait,
hope everybody
one
has.
second. One
Okay.
second. We got to wish you a happy birthday.
Oh yeah,
Happy
that's right.
birthday, Jeremy.
Thank you. So you see what I'm doing on my birthday. It involves detection. So
I love it.
that's what happens when you become just obsessed with something. This is how we spend it on your birthday, doing something like this. But thank you, and hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2026. I'm looking forward to some of the workshops we have scheduled. Looking forward to seeing you in Vegas, and everybody stay safe.
Merry Christmas. Take care.